And now, ladies and gentlemen, to start our next session, please welcome Ben Becker, Editor-in-Chief of Breakthrough News.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. We're about to begin our next panel, Beyond Propaganda, a very important panel on independent media and the efforts to build an alternative apparatus that can challenge the mainstream media. On behalf of Breakthrough News, of course, we want to thank ADC and ArabCon again for inviting us back for a second year. We've been streaming every panel of this conference for the last 3-4 days. So we want to especially thank those who have been watching from home and thank all of you for being here. Anyone who you want to send the video to and say you have to watch this speech, please go to our channel, youtube.com/Breakthrough News, where we'll be streaming today's panel and we've been doing the last few days. I want to welcome to the stage two fearless journalists who I'm sure you know very well from Breakthrough, Rania Khalek and Eugene Puryear.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes,
Is this working? Am I on?
You're on, I believe.
I can't hear myself. Am I on?
You're on.
Oh, I'm on.
Test.
Breakthrough News. Go to YouTube right now. Everyone take your phone out.
Yeah.
Go to YouTube. We'll put it on silent, first of all. Then go to YouTube and look up Breakthrough News and press subscribe. Make sure you're subscribed to us. All social media at BT Newsroom.
So a little bit about Breakthrough News. We'll show you some of our work and we want to talk to you about some of our perspectives. My name is Ben Becker. As I said, we started Breakthrough 5 years ago, and the reason we got into this work of media, we weren't actually starting as journalists. I started as an activist myself in the Palestine Solidarity Movement, the anti-war movement, and any of you who here has been to a protest and been frustrated by the mainstream media coverage of that protest? Every single person. I remember in 2014 during the siege of Gaza then, we had a mass protest in Washington, D.C., where we were so mad at the mainstream media that we did a march to the mainstream media. We marched on the Washington Post headquarters to protest their lack of coverage, and they didn't even cover the protest at their front door. We brought 15,000 people. We had like mock caskets draped in flags. Cornel West was in the front with us. We had the celebrities, and they still wouldn't cover it.
Right.
And so after years of organizing protests without any competent media coverage, we decided as activists we have to start our own media. And this was the birth of Breakthrough News 5 years ago. So that's how I got into the media, and we've been building ever since. I don't know if Eugene and Rania, would you like to speak? Why are you in journalism?
Well, I don't come out of activism like these two do. I actually have a degree in something completely unrelated to journalism. I have a degree in exercise physiology.
Somewhat related.
Yeah, so I didn't learn journalism by training. I was a bit self-taught. In fact, someone who really taught me most of what I know is Ali Amunima of the Electronic Intifada, who I love. He was actually supposed to be here today, but he wasn't able to come. But I adore him so much, and he was a real mentor to me. But I got into journalism because it was the Obama-McCain election, which feels like it was a million years ago now. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, this guy's middle name is Hussein. Clearly he's not gonna bomb the Middle East, right? I was very wrong about that. But I was so obsessed with finding out what his positions were with regard to Palestine that I totally by accident stumbled upon independent media outlets like Democracy Now! And just went down a rabbit hole of, like Noam Chomsky and Vijay Prashad and Naomi Klein and on, all these people that I learned so much from. And then I was like, I have to do journalism. I can't look back now. And so independent media really changed the trajectory of my life. And that's why I'm privileged enough to get to work with these guys at Breakthrough News where, we don't have to answer to corporate sponsors. We can be honest about genocide. We can be honest about the racism and inequality in this country. And, we get to tell the truth. And, I get to host a show. I host a show at Breakthrough News. Some of you might know it. If you don't, check it out. It's called Dispatches with Rania Khalek, where I get to do these long-form interviews with people, some of whom are heroes of mine. I think one of them is here. You might have heard her talk yesterday, Lara Shihab, and many, many others. Like I've had Eugene on the show, I've had Ben on the show, and then we get to make documentaries. It's really cool what we get to do, especially in this moment when we're just up against this tsunami of insane propaganda. And so that's why I'm in journalism, because I want to be able to inform people about the horrors happening in this world, not just to make them feel outraged, but so that we can build a better world. And to that, I'll give it to Eugene. Why are you at Breakthrough News?
You know, they offered me a job. No, I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, I think it's similar to what Ben was saying in terms of why we created the outlet. I mean, I've done a lot of organizing for many, many different years, really starting in 2001, 2002, and I often had been a sacrificial lamb, if you will, going into various mainstream media outlets, and when they try to cover it or want to cover it. So you'd seen it not only from what wasn't covered, but also how poorly things were covered. I'll never forget once I went into CNN to do this hit, and it was supposed to be a 45-minute hit. It was about, you know, America's wars in West Asia's bombing, different things like that. We have this whole pre-meeting, you know, and they're just like, yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we want to talk about this, we want to talk about that. Honestly, I can't even remember exactly what I said, but all I know is I get in there as a morning show, and they asked me whatever the first question was, like, why should the U.S. not be, you know, bombing and sanctioning and doing different things? And whatever my answer was, the second I was finished, the anchor goes, you know what, that was fantastic. We're going to have to cut to commercial, and we really appreciate that. And I was like, what happened to the 45 minutes? Because it was like 6 minutes. And the producer, I remember, comes over the mic, and she was like, you were awesome. That was so great. We will definitely have you back. Never heard from them again. So, you know, it's the understanding that, you know, you have to be able to tell your own stories. I mean, obviously, there's really nothing you can do about the existence of the mainstream media in that sense. It exists, it's out there, it's there, but it doesn't mean that it's the only option, it's the only possibility. You can create your own narratives, and that those narratives can work symbiotically. And I think I've always drawn from the history of Paul Robeson's Freedom newspaper, the Baltimore Afro-American, the Southern Patriot, all of these fantastic publications and journalists and people who were directly symbiotic with the movements for freedom and liberation in this country and made a huge contribution, and I thought we could do something similar at Breakthrough News, and so I was happy to get on the other side of the camera and put shoulder to the wheel in a critically important part of the struggle for justice and liberation.
You know, when you look at...
Thank you.
One of the byproducts of having this live stream genocide and the horrible mainstream coverage that it took so long to even use the word genocide, some of them still won't use the word genocide, no matter what all the international courts say, is that I think people's eyes have opened about the nature of the mainstream media in a way that's that we weren't even expecting.
Yep.
And so for our channel, for instance, we now have surpassed 1 million subscribers on YouTube, 2.2 million followers.
Thank you.
And it's with a fairly small budget, it's with a fairly small team, but it's simply people are seeking the truth. Our beats, like the things that we're focused on when we started, was the social justice movements in the United States and geopolitics. And so then when the genocide began and this huge movement of millions of people around the country took to the streets, we were very well positioned to film that movement, to show that movement for what it was, to show the humanity of the people who were taking the streets. And we were there at the very beginning of the Columbia student encampment, thinking it was going to be a one-day event. Thinking it was going to be a one-day event. We're going to make a little short social media 2-minute package. And instead, what we ended up producing was a full documentary. Some of you may have seen it, The Encampments. This is a film that we have been very lucky to work with Watermelon Pictures, who's distributed the film. And now you can find it on their Watermelon Plus and other streaming services. For those who haven't seen it, we wanted to show a short clip of it or trailer of it so that basically everyone at least has a little taste of it and can go watch it when you go home and go hopefully organize screenings, because we want to have many, many people see the film, and we're going into award season. We want the film to at least be in the conversation over the next 3 or 4 months. If we can play the trailer, please.
You can watch it.
We're here to discuss the little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America.
There is a movement to radicalize young people.
Can you believe they are chanting about the intifada in New York City?
I really believe they are brainwashed.
There was a very concerted effort by the media to portray things a certain way and refuse to discuss Gaza. Colombia is materially invested in the genocide of Gaza. We don't want our money to go towards Palestinian death.
I was born and raised in a Palestinian refugee camp. The university was cracking down on Palestinian activism on campus.
It's completely farcical to imply that in any way, like, Jewish people were being persecuted.
I have never felt more proud to be Jewish than when I was pushing our university to divest from genocide.
They would just criminalize anyone who would participate in a protest. That was the moment where students were like, we need to do something more.
The people they won't leave is what is threatening about divesting and one in peace.
The university would say like, oh, you're overestimating your power. I remember like telling them there are 60 universities setting up encampments across the United States.
We got Yale holding it down right now online.
What you willing to risk? What you willing to give? What if you were in Gaza? What if those were your kids?
In '68, the students at Columbia took over the campus, mainly in protest of the war in Vietnam. Columbia talks about how it was okay then, but not okay now.
Bravery is very contagious. We kind of watched Colombia in awe, and we knew we were next.
The only weapon they have is fear, and we call them forth. They have nothing!
Every time I see like that documentary, I've seen the encampments probably like 7 or 8 times, and it gives me chills, makes me cry, and makes me feel so empowered all at the same time. I'm like so proud to be at an outlet that created that. I really am.
Thank you, Rania. And we also definitely want to thank Macklemore, whose music you heard in the trailer and who came on as an executive producer of the film. He's been a huge help in the film reaching a new audience of people. So that's sort of a taste of what we've been able to cover here in the United States, but that's not all that we do, because obviously the real misinformation is about what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Lebanon, what's happening in Palestine, and correcting the narrative in that respect is super important. So we also wanted to show you a short trailer from a documentary we recently put out that Rania made about Lebanon, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about it. Can we play the second clip, please?
صارت ترنب بطريقة كتير قوية.
صرت اسمع صوت الضيمة صفير كتير قوي.
كبسوا الكل فجر كتير.
طاروا أصابيعي، عم بقول له لبيه مش حنشوف.
العظمة تبعت وشي كانت مبينة. باللحظة الأولى قلت خلص خسرته لحسان، وكانت إصابته كتير قوية. حسان أنا تشوه واحد.
The Israelis are the best.
I absolutely support that. In fact, if anything, I love it.
كانت البيجر بس ضيعها أنا رح أبرم عليها بين ألعاب النت.
A child who was killed by an exploding pager is not the victim of collateral damage.
كل ما إنه دكتور عن عملية بقول له لا، أنا أول شيء بخاف.
Beep beep.
What's your response to that?
حري بهم أن يخجلوا من أنفسهم.
نحن أوقات بخافوا يحاربوا رجلهم.
نحن لا نهزم، وإن جرحنا نستثمر بجراحنا حتى ننتصر. الضحك نحن حنضحكوا بالأخير. هذا وعد الله.
It's heavy stuff.
Yes, Rania. So why that film? That's obviously a subject that it got almost zero coverage or accurate coverage in the U.S. media. What made you want to cover it yourself?
I mean, that's a really great question. A few things. I mean, first of all, I am Lebanese. Thank you. And so I live in Beirut, so this issue is very near and dear to my heart. Because those are all of us, Lebanese, Syrian, Palestinian, Middle Eastern, those are our people. And this was a disgusting attack. Everything Israel's done for the last 2 years has been heinous, disgusting, atrocious, all the words you can think of. But there was something about this pager attack that was just so horrific and scary because it was unprecedented to booby trap civilian devices this way. And to have so many children have their faces disfigured as a result of that, to have the media here in the US celebrate it as something sophisticated and precise and almost James Bond-like in nature that should be celebrated, to see the way the Israelis have since then turned it into a joke. They often will give speeches both in their country and here, joking that they are gonna hand out pagers to the enemy. We saw them give Trump a golden pager trophy. They think it's funny they did this to people. They have ruined so many lives. And this also, because they've booby-trapped devices, it's never, a terrorist attack like this, that's what it was a terrorist attack, has never been done this way. They set a new precedent that will certainly be used in future conflicts. And also everyone, the way it was covered, thought, oh, it was just a fight between, Israel and Hezbollah. And so I wanted to show, no, this was actually an attack on average people, just regular people who weren't on a battlefield fighting. And so I wanted to show the reality of it. And that's what I did. If you haven't seen this documentary, I really encourage you to go check it out. It's really important to see what the people who were impacted are still dealing with. Surgery after surgery. And in the aftermath, the US basically pressured the Lebanese government along with the Israelis to stop allowing Iranian planes to land in Lebanon. And it made it more difficult for people to get medical care because, in Lebanon, we don't have a state, they don't care. And so actually Iran stepped up to give people free medical care who were injured by these pager attacks. That required people to go to Iran and Iraq for surgeries. And so it made it that much more difficult to do. But anyways, you can go learn all about that in this documentary. But yeah, I'm really glad I got to make it. And I really can't think of anywhere else I would have been able to have the resources to create documentation like this, except for a place like Breakthrough News. There's nothing in English like this about the pager attacks. And actually, honestly, even in Arabic, I got to collaborate with a really amazing filming studio, a production studio in Lebanon called Blue House Film, which I'm very, very happy I got to do that. But yeah, so definitely go watch it.
Thank you, Rania. Eugene, Rania ended her comment there talking about sort of the collaborations that are necessary in independent media, that we are up against a very, very powerful enemy with essentially limitless resources and multiple broadcast channels, each saying the same thing, but creating kind of a echo chamber where it feels like, independent, alternative voices, pro-Palestinian voices are silenced. And yet it feels like we're at an inflection point, in part because now we have people power. We don't have the money power, but we have people power, and we have individuals supporting each other, boosting each other's content, sharing each other's content, interviewing each other, working with others. So do you feel, this has been the discussion for the last 3 or 4 days. I know Mehdi and Bassem were also asked about it, optimism versus pessimism. Is it right to say that we're at an inflection point for the media, that people are about to basically say, enough with the traditional media, I've lost all confidence, I've lost all trust, and now I'm going to turn towards alternative sources for their information?
Yes and no. I think that we are at an inflection point, certainly when we're talking about the issue of Palestine, and I think where we've come in the past 2 years, as insufficient in many ways as it's been, as the genocide continues to be ongoing, there's obviously been a sea change. And I think the thing about inflection points is inflection points are not like everything is about to change all at once and everything bad just goes away, right? Like when you look back in history, you could say that a year like 1964 was an inflection point in the civil rights movement, right? And that everything was starting to change, that you had the Civil Rights Act and you had all these other things. You also had one of the most significant increases in Ku Klux Klan terrorism that the country had ever seen. And dozens of people who were brutally murdered, maybe even more than that. We don't even know all of their names. But of course, in history, you don't think about it like that because the civil rights movement was relatively victorious and did go on to do so many great things that the work of the enemies to stop it has faded in the historical moment. And I do think that's the moment that we are in. And, we interviewed Craig Mokaiber relatively recently, and he had a great phrase. He said that there's $1 trillion curtain to hide the crimes of Israel from the world, but there's so many tears in that curtain. And please applaud, because you're a part of that. It's the alternative media, but it's also all of us. You know, as they used to say in the slave times, each one teach one. Everything you've done with your loved ones, your coworkers, your feeds, all of that have pulled those tears in. But on the same token, they're not just giving up. And so even though we can recognize that the tears have happened in the curtain, and certainly, you know, it's substantial where people are at. I mean, you've got, I think something, you know, polls are a snapshot in time. There's a lot of them. 68% of people in the country do not agree with the ongoing genocide in Gaza. You've got Israel's approval rating is now underwater, sort of for the first time ever since they've been doing the polls. Over 50% are opposed. So you can see these changes, but the people who make the propaganda, the people who made the curtain in the first place, are 100% aware of that. And they're doing everything possible to be able to push back. And you can even look at the context of what's happening in terms of the consolidation of the media landscape, you know, in both social media and mainstream media. People are certainly losing trust in mainstream media, but quite frankly, a lot of the content on social media is coming from mainstream media, you know what I mean? And so just because, you know, it's on social media doesn't mean someone isn't posting the New York Times. And so those names are significant. So Larry Ellison, for instance, who's probably about to become one of the co-founders of TikTok. He's one of the richest people on earth. $100 billion fortune. Yes. If you Google Larry Ellison Israel, some like pro-Israeli site has a list of the top 10 Zionist billionaires. He's number one. So he's going to be the co-owner of TikTok. So that's social media. And we know that TikTok is what they were blaming as opposed to the actual genocidal actions for why young people were changing, because it was showing the truth.
Sorry, Nikki Haley actually said that every 30 seconds of watching TikTok makes you 17% more anti-Semitic. I don't even know where she got that number.
Right. So now they're handing it over to the number one guy, who I think once said his heart was in Israel. His son is also the CEO of Skydance Productions, was now on CBS, which, by the way, is about to turn over its news organization or editorial stuff to Bari Weiss from the Free Press, so you can see what's happening there. Elon Musk obviously controls X. You can see what's happening there. I mean, even you look at the Washington Post, you look at Facebook, and these people, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg, were known as like liberals, but you see they've now gone fully into the Trump camp. I mean, you know, Karen Attiah has gone from the Washington Post. Facebook is becoming, you know, significantly more censorious. So we are at an inflection point, but that's the thing about inflection points is you have to continue to push for things to fully go over the precipice to actually make full change. So I think we've come a long way. I think a lot of things are happening in a positive sense, but from the point of view of alternative media and independent media, we actually have to do significantly more. And we actually have to not only promote it more, we have to resources more, we have to institutionalize it more, because ultimately the fight back is now beginning from the alternative, the $1 trillion curtain sphere, because they see how much they've really lost.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing to think about how social media was being upheld as kind of the alternative to the traditional media, that it was going to be more free, more democratic. I think there were all these statistics that 5 companies own 90% of the traditional media, right? You've seen those sort of octopus kind of graphs where it's like a few companies that control everything. And social media was supposed to be this free space where anyone could distribute anything. And now we find the same sort of monopoly, hegemonic control, total consolidation of social media in the same way. And so that leaves us with a big problem, because that's how people are getting their news. So Rania, how are we dealing with this suppression question? How do we get over
Ooh, that's a tough one.
What you've called, I think in the office you're always like, the dictatorship of the algorithm. Yeah. We have to overthrow the dictatorship of the algorithm. So how do we do it?
Regime change. No, it's really tough because we are up against a tsunami of propaganda from so many different angles, right? Like you've got the mainstream apparatus, which literally just like pretends we don't exist. Like, it's like we have 1 million subscribers on YouTube. And that's a lot. That's for a leftist, anti-imperialist outlet. That's a lot of subscribers. The second we hit 1 million subscribers, our numbers took a nosedive on YouTube. Like we are obviously being actively suppressed. Right-wing think tanks have written about us, calling us the arm of like all kinds of things: Iran, China, Hamas, name it. We've been called it.
Anything that sounds bad.
To try to make it sound like we're doing propaganda. It's like, no, we're just telling the truth, but you want to call that propaganda, fine. But all that is written so that Meta and Google will then suppress us because our information is dangerous, right? I can't remember the last time I grew on Twitter. Personally, I know we're kind of toggle, we've reached seemingly a ceiling on Twitter. So yeah, it's not just a tsunami of propaganda from the mainstream. It's also these algorithms. We don't know what they are. on social media. They're all secret algorithms that are controlled by people who are imperialists, and they want to still control the narrative. But that's the thing about outlets like ours, is we still, no pun intended or pun intended, break through at times. But yeah, you're not going to ever see us on CNN. Have you gotten any invitations?
Not in a long time.
Yeah, I haven't been invited on CNN. I haven't seen Ben on CNN. The New York Times pretends we don't exist. So but I do think it's really important that we are building our own platform, because we're not going to be invited on CNN. And that's why we create our own space, and we just have to keep pushing back and breaking through. And also, people in the audience who need to be supporting outlets like Breakthrough News. That's so important, because we don't depend on Lockheed Martin. We literally are running on almost like, a small budget to build or to create the encampments and to create a pager documentary and to speak to the reality. And it really is an uphill battle. But all that said, we are breaking through. I get invited on Piers Morgan. I don't know if that matters.
You destroyed him.
Yeah.
And I get to go on there and refuse to condemn armed resistance and, say all those kinds of things to a massive audience. I mean, the reason they're inviting me on is because Breakthrough News exists, and we're getting lots of views there, and they care about clicks, and other people are seeing us as a result. So yes, it's an uphill battle, but I think that independent media is contributing so much to the conversation right now, and people are so hungry. People know they are being lied to. And I think the genocide in Gaza has not just exposed Israel and Palestine and the region. It's exposed imperialism. People are looking at what's happening in Gaza and learning about what the U.S. does in Asia, learning about what the U.S. has done in the Middle East, going back even before the British mandate in Palestine, learning about what the U.S. does in Latin America, funding death squads and regime change wars. And, they complain about immigration into this country, but those people are coming to this country because you destroyed their countries, right? And so people are coming to outlets like Breakthrough News to get that history and to learn about the system. And you know what else they're learning? They're learning that they're in debt in this country. They're in debt for going to college, which is supposed to, give us a leg up to be more successful in life. But then we end up in our 30s and 40s still paying off college debt, still having, getting into medical debt because insurance in this country is so expensive. Medical care in this country is so expensive. They're cutting everything. They're cutting all these subsidies, food stamps, Medicaid, anything that can help people, destroying public housing. Meanwhile, where's all our money going? All our money is going to destroying the world to maintain this luxurious lifestyle for this tiny little ruling elite in this country that are a bunch of parasites. And so all that's to say, Gaza is teaching the world this. And so I think that's an important inflection point too. And at an independent media outlet like ours, that's the information you're gonna get. And I think that's what makes us dangerous to the powers that be. That's why members of Congress come after us, because they don't want people coming to Breakthrough News and learning that 8 people in America have more average wealth than the bottom half of this country. That's insane. Yeah. 8 people have more average wealth than what's half of 350 million? 175 million people?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's crazy. They don't want people to know that. So that's why we get suppressed. And you know what? The fact that we're getting suppressed means we're doing something right.
Yeah, Eugene, I wonder if you could help speak to this moment a little bit too. I mean, Rania mentioned some of the attacks from the government against us. And of course, it's not just us. They're going to go after all the that speak the truth. There is a First Amendment, right, that's supposed to exist that allows us to speak out and publish. Trump is obviously going after that. It was not just Trump. There was some of these attacks began under the Biden administration, as we know. But in my view, the way I studied at least, and I would like your thoughts on it. When you look, it's basically it's a real battle. It's not, you said uphill battle. You can use many different phrases. It's a real battle. And the U.S. military considers the control of hearts and minds part of their military doctrine. This is not an accidental element of their warfare strategy. The information war that we're being put under is deliberate. They have the old conventional style of warfare. You have land, sea, and air. Those are the 3 dimensions of warfare. Then they added space, right? They have the Space Force because they want to get even higher than the air, right? That's the high ground. Then they added cyber.
Yeah.
Cyber force, that's the 5th dimension of warfare. And then David Petraeus, when he comes back from Iraq, and where they basically lost in Iraq, he says, why did we lose in Iraq? He's the main commander, and he said, we basically lost because we couldn't win over the hearts and minds of the people. The mental dimension, the mental terrain is the 6th dimension of warfare. They actually have a strategic doctrine where they put this out in public, that there are 6 dimensions of warfare: air, land, sea, space, cyber, and your mind. Your mind is part of their military strategy. And it's obviously the reason why they can't defeat the Palestinian people, because they can't ever convince the Palestinian people to give up their land or give up their homeland. And so all the military tools in the world can't succeed when the people have decided that they're not going to concede. With that being said, it's a very ferocious war, a very ferocious battle that's being waged, because once you start to actually change people's minds, they want to shut you down. And when I look at what's been happening these last few weeks, Trump's statements, some of these right-wing influencers, what they're saying about Dearborn in particular, it's all to just try to silence the people, try to get us to stop talking. So how do we meet this moment, understanding it's a very, I understand why people are scared. Some of this language is I wouldn't say unprecedented, but we haven't seen it in a long time in this country.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point, and to connect 2 things, Alex Karp, who's the CEO of Palantir, which is, I don't even really know, evil personified, I guess, but a corporation that's very involved in the military-industrial complex, said about the encampments, the student encampments, when he was asked, he was talking about this information war, this issue, the battle of the minds, and I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but the paraphrase of the quote is, if we can't win this battle for the minds of the young people in higher education, we'll never be able to deploy Western militaries, not just the US, Western militaries to any other country ever again. And I think that's an important factor, and it's connecting to the point that Rania is making about what Gaza is really revealing to the whole world, but how important they understand that your mind really is. That, in order to really be able to impose these policies, you have to have some level of consent, even if it's subconscious consent. And so I think you're right. We haven't seen this in a long time, but we have seen it before. And we're talking about inflection points. We're talking about changes. Major warfare in the information domain to shut people up and to close down debate almost always emerges at times of great turmoil for the rich and powerful in the United States and around the world. They had the First Amendment, but just after they wrote it in 1798, I'm going way back, I know, but John Adams had the Alien and Sedition Acts to basically say it was illegal to publish. And one of the people they arrested, they said, he's so dangerous because he's getting Irish people and black people together to talk about how to end slavery. So we better shut that down. We better close down that newspaper. And there were newspapers that were talking about the French Revolution and saying, some of that looks kind of good. Maybe we need some of that spirit in America. And they said, we got to shut that down. We got to shut down the newspapers. It's the same thing if you look after the First World War. When they started going after the radicals, and you might have heard of it, the First Red Scare, the Little Red Scare, we often hear about, the Big Bill Haywoods, the Emma Goldmans, the organizers. But the other thing that most people don't know is one of the main targets was the press. And in fact, that was some of the most dangerous things. They said the Messenger in particular, which was a black radical publication, was the most dangerous publication in America because it was talking about how after the First World War, when they said the world is safe for democracy, well, that meant that should be an end to colonialism and Jim Crow. Better shut them up. That's how they go after it. You look at, I mentioned Paul Robeson's Freedom newspaper earlier, and McCarthyism, the same thing. And so this is tough, but it's commonplace. And part of why I'm giving all these answers is that they failed to shut people up in all these certain realities. Ultimately, the Alien and Sedition Act became a total debacle, and Adams and his entire political party were wiped out. Obviously, Joe McCarthy and J. Edgar Hoover's names are now, so low down in the dirt that even the people who love them would never say them. The people who love J. Edgar Hoover are like, I love Martin Luther King, even though obviously J. Edgar Hoover spent all his time, because the moral and the social power of the civil rights movement has made it, not really popular to associate yourself with any of these sorts of realities. So I think we have to remember, and we have to think about this history, and we have to contextualize the current moment that we're going in. Is yet again we are in a time of great turmoil for everyone. But we're in a time of, I think, great fear for the rich and the powerful in the world, whose whole system that backs genocide, that backs unbelievable income inequality, poverty, hunger. I mean, we're living in a world where no one should be poor or no one should be hungry. Like, we as human beings can easily solve all those problems, but we don't. Or not we don't, they don't. And in fact, they create the problems on purpose to maintain a stranglehold over society so they can get filthy rich while everyone else is struggling. And they see that more and more people do not want that. In every corner of the globe, people are saying, why don't we have more peace? Why don't we have more justice? Why don't we have more shared prosperity amongst all of us? And they know that in these times of great turmoil, right, when an earthquake happens, things start to shift. That things are really starting to shift, and so they better shut people up. And I think that we have to recognize that it's not a risk-free situation, and it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be worried. You probably should be a little scared and a little worried because it is serious. But at the end of the day, all of the people they tried to shut up are the people they remember. You know, when you think about the abolitionist movement against slavery, no one remembers, who killed Elijah Lovejoy, who was a great abolitionist printer, who they killed him, they murdered him, they burned down his storehouse, and they threw his printing press into the river. No one knows who he is. But if you go to Illinois now, all where he is, there's big historical markers to him, and they teach about him in the schools. People remember Frederick Douglass, even though he was hunted with a price on his head. People remember William Lloyd Garrison, who was a printer who had a newspaper, who they said, you got to shut him up, who every slave owner in America was like, how do we stop this guy and kill him? No one remembers their names. No one remembers who they are, even though they committed great crimes, but people remember those who stood up and told truth to power, even when the risk was big.
Rania, I don't know if you saw Netanyahu the other day having his meeting with influencers.
Why you gotta trigger me like that? Why you gotta trigger me like that?
He who shall not be named had a meeting with influencers, and he was talking about the TikTok purchase and other things. What'd you think when you saw that?
So I see desperation. The Israelis have been very helpful in helping us show the world how horrible Zionism and imperialism are. They have. They've helped us expose them. They're exposing themselves in many ways for us. They rape and celebrate it. They behead babies and celebrate it. They disgustingly and sociopathically dress in the clothes of the peoples whose homes they destroy, especially women. And what's going on there? It's a very sick society. It's like a horrible experiment, and just how fascist you can allow a society, indoctrinated society, to become. And they're proud of it. They're really proud of it. They brag about it on social media. And they brag about it in English sometimes too. But also it makes them look so bad that, Eugene was mentioning some of those polling numbers before. Israel is hated more than ever before. I mean, for those, many of us in this room are Arab, right? And if we grew up in the US, I was born and raised in the US. And I grew up knowing Israel's atrocious nature as a settler colonial state. I grew up understanding that. I've been going to protests since before I could even walk, thanks to my mom and dad who instilled that value in me for a free Palestine. I grew up watching Lebanon be bombed by Israel. I grew up understanding the propagandistic nature of the media when it comes not just to Israel, but when it comes to foreign policy in general, because I understood Palestine. But a lot of people around me didn't get that, right? Because of this propaganda machine that makes Israel seem like this, like part of Western civilization at the forefront of protecting us from the evil hordes of Arabs and Muslims in the Middle East or whatever. And so it was always very difficult growing up in that environment, and to see how things were before around this issue to post 2023, it's like night and day. People hate Israel because Israel has shown who it is. And people, again, are questioning U.S. government policy and the nature of the U.S. government because it supports this genocide. The same thing, something similar is happening in Europe, maybe everywhere except for Germany, because I don't know what's wrong with Germany. That's a different problem. It requires a different panel.
1 million people did protest yesterday in Germany, though,
for
Gaza, and filled the streets in front of the Brandenburg
Gate. Good for them. Good for
Maybe
them.
it was not 1 million, but it was a lot.
Okay, well, I'm just going to go with 1 million. That makes me feel good.
Yeah.
But all that's to say, to go back to your question about when I see someone like Netanyahu talking about the need to control things like TikTok. And I see Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL talking about the need to control TikTok so we can get like anti-Israel content off of it. I see desperation. These people are desperate to put lipstick on a pig. They're desperate to make genocide seem not like genocide, but it's too late. You cannot undo what people have seen for the last 2 years. You know, social media feeds being filled with amputated babies. You can't undo that. It's too late. Israel's too far gone. And I think it's an important point to understand, because I think a lot of us are getting stuck in defeatism right now, right? It feels like the Israelis are winning. Even in Lebanon, people always say, they joke, we're living in greater Israel now. Because, you know, Israel has been able to weaken the resistance across the region for the last 2 years in a pretty significant way. People have fought back as best they could, but Israel just has, you know, superior technology, superior weapons, the backing of the most powerful countries in the world. That said, they have lost the world. You saw Netanyahu speak at the UN. The room walked out. The room walked out. There was like 8 people left in that room. That says something. The world is against Israel in a way it never, ever has been. That is huge. And it's horrible that it took a genocide in Gaza and increasingly in the West Bank to make that happen. But those sacrifices will not be in vain, because there's no going back to how it was before. So I'll go back to what you asked. This is desperation. The thing about desperation is they're going to get more vicious. To what Eugene was talking about. This is why we're being attacked the way we are right now. This is why they're coming after our media outlets, our nonprofits. They're coming after Dearborn. I mean, the insane things that I've been seeing on social media, this coordinated right-wing MAGA attack on Dearborn is meant to scare you into shutting up. So we can't let them scare us into shutting up. We have to be smart. We have to be smart about how we speak. For sure, but we don't stop speaking. We don't let fear paralyze us in moments like this, because there's more of us based on public opinion. I don't just mean us Arabs. I don't just mean us leftists. There are more of us who actually have souls and are still human on the inside. There are more of us than there are of this parasitic ruling class. We have the numbers. So we don't let them stop us, because the difference between like a moment like now and let's say after 9/11 or even McCarthyism is that the population is not on board with destroying the First Amendment. The population is not on board with supporting genocide. It's quite the opposite. So yes, I see desperation. And I see people who feel like, yeah, now they feel powerful and emboldened, but they see the writing on the wall and they know that the end is near for their settler colonial project.
Eugene, you see it the same way?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to deny. I mean, the thing about history that I think is notable is anything good that happens right before it happened, nobody thought it was about to happen. I mean, you never know exactly where you are in the historical process. And I think that's the thing, is that we're always judging by the only thing we can judge, right? Is sort of the experiences and the information that we have around us. But we don't have all the information, and we don't have all the experiences, and we don't have all the knowledge. So I think that desperation is absolutely what's happening. And they wouldn't care so much. I mean, this is the point you're making, Rania. They wouldn't care so much if they didn't have some level of fear that their narrative slipping is more than just their narrative slipping, but that it's the precursor, the pretext that has to exist for there to be mass action, for there to be transformative change. And they know that it's possible, and they want to stop it before it's too late. And I think that's what we always have to remember, is that we actually have no idea where we are in the historical process. And so much of getting people to wear down and to stop is because of that fact. And it's like, if we can just get them to think that they're not doing well, that they're not actually defeating us, and that people just say, I'm going to go home and shut up and not say anything, then we will definitely win, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we have to remember that we have to always keep pushing forward no matter what. One of my favorite quotes of all time, it comes from the Montgomery bus boycott. And people know the story generally, the Montgomery bus boycott. And towards the end, they're like a year in, everybody's walking at this point, because like they've actually legally, they outlawed carpooling, they outlawed everything. So just everyone has to walk, and no one is still riding the buses. And again, this is like just before they win. And it seems like the bus boycott is actually about to totally collapse, and that this movement that had seemed so powerful, that was getting headlines around the world, that was challenging Jim Crow, that it just wasn't going to work because walking 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10 miles back and forth every day to work, you know, is not it. Like, that's not easy. And people didn't know what to do. And it felt like everything they'd done is turned around. So anyway, long story short, they're having these mass meetings basically every night in Montgomery to try to keep people's spirits high, and they're pretty low. And at one of the ones towards the end, an elder from the community, a woman named Mother Pollard, I think she was in like her 90s, maybe her 80s. She was walking every day to work. She was still working as a domestic. And as it was sort of, no one knew where the room was going to go and where things going to start to collapse, she walked to the front of the room and she took the rostrum and she said, "My feet are tired, but my soul is rested." And the whole thing erupted in cheers, and they kept walking, and like 2 weeks later, they won the Montgomery bus boycott. But no one knew, you know, they were about to give up. They were about to give up. And I think that's the truth about so many different movements and change that has happened, not just in the United States, but around the world, is like just when it feels like, wow, can we go on any longer? That's when you have to keep going no matter what, because that's when you're getting closest. The saying that they say, it's always darkest before the dawn, is 100% true. And I think that's the moment that we're in right now, but we have to remember that so that we don't allow ourselves to be ground down and stopped prematurely when we're definitely making a big impact, and they know it, they're scared, that's why they want to shut it up.
Yeah.
Well, I think you all see the privilege of what it is to work with Eugene every day, where he just drops historical knowledge to correspond with it every moment you're in. And, you know, it actually connects to my next question, which is really about media and education. That I feel that, you know, as much as we've had a big impact on social media, and by nature, its format also makes it very challenging to have sort of deeper educational interventions sometimes. And I want to just be frank, I feel like this is a weakness we have as a movement, because we can't just say all the strengths that we have, that we're growing, we have lots of great influencers and so forth, but there's a weakness in kind of the influencer culture. There's a weakness in it, and that is that someone who's doing great work can get shut down in a moment, and all the work they've accumulated over 2 or 3 years, some of them are here in the room, I know, can just be taken offline. And to have an alternative media that's focused around individuals, it might make it actually easier for them to stamp it out. Of course, you know, they hire someone who runs Meta now, and that's basically her full-time job, is like stamping out influencers who have an impact. So how do we navigate this, and how do we make sort of deeper educational impact with our media? It feels like most of the media we consume is like, mainstream media at least, like to make you dumber.
Yeah.
Like to have no sense of history, to always be stuck in the present. So, you know, you see the deportations happening and you think, oh, like there's nothing we can do. But then you learn about the whole history of people who fought against deportations, and then you feel like, oh, they fought, we can fight. But when you turn on CNN, you're not going to get a sense of history like what Eugene just gave. You know, you're going to get very quick sort of talking points and little sound bites that they're not going to nourish your soul to stay in the struggle. And social media feeds off conflict.
Yeah.
And when you go on social media, we find on even our own pages, the pro-Palestinian pages, just like little fights. And this can like drag you down. And you have little sort of atomized, this person talks on this issue, this person talks on that issue. And so you have sort of issue-based separation. We have a lot of atomization, a lot of sort of we're fighting this great behemoth, but we're kind of fighting it as individuals. So when we're out in the streets, we're protesting all together. I think we all feel the collective, but then we go back to on our phones and we feel like individuals. So I just want to name that as a problem. It's kind of a tension. So how as independent media are we forming organization? How are we keeping the spirit of collectivity, that we're all in this together? How are we collaborating? How are we educating at a deeper level? How are we actually getting people to put down their phones and to come into spaces like this?
I mean, those are a lot of challenges, and if we had the answers, we wouldn't be talking about having the challenges. But I do think that with regard to like the sort of atomization or the, you know, bickering between different segments of our movement, you know, it's like our enemies are united, are very united. So we have to be united, especially in moments of tension like this when we're all under attack. And to the issue of like personalities, I mean, I think that's a really big issue because on the one hand, it's good to have big personalities because people like big personalities, right? They feel represented by them.
You're a big personality. I feel represented by you.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm glad I can play that role, but also like, you know, sometimes people are like, well, why don't you do like, you know, people used to ask me, why don't you do your own thing? Like just like have your own YouTube page. I'm like, why would I do that? Like, I want to actually be a part of institution building. Yeah, I mean, I could have, you know, the Rania Khalek show on Rania Khalek's YouTube page where it's all about, you know, Rania talking. But what happens if like, you know, Rania gets sick? Or if like, you know, I don't know, Rania gets taken off YouTube? Or, you know, God, one day we all die. Like, and I'm not trying to talk about myself in the third person. I'm just saying, like, right? Like that's, you know, like it's kind of like with the Bernie Sanders moment. Like it's great to have that cult of personality, but then Bernie Sanders goes away and suddenly the movement's gone, right? And I think that media works in a similar way. It's nice to have Eugene and Rania. It's also nice to have breakthrough news because even if like I go away or Eugene goes away or something happens and we can't be there or, you know, we have other shows, we have other people, we have so much talent and so much knowledge that it still exists even if I have to step away or Eugene steps away. And so I think that what we're doing is actually a part of pushing back against that influencer cult of personality, where yeah, you use it to your advantage because people like a loud voice. I know I'm loud, but like at the same time, breakthrough news is loud. And it outlives us all, I hope. I hope, you know, that's the dream, right? Is like one day when we're all gone, breakthrough news is still, you know, chugging along and more powerful than ever, telling the truth. So, I mean, yeah, I think that what we're doing is really like pushing back as an institution, and not to make it all about breakthrough news, but I'm gonna make it all about breakthrough news. That is why, if you are in this room and you already watch breakthrough news and you're a fan, and you're not a member, go to patreon.com/breakthrough news and become a member, or talk to us about giving us way more if you're somebody with deep pockets. And if you're just learning about breakthrough news, go check it out. Go watch our content. We've got so many shows. Me and Eugene host a live stream every Thursday called the Freedom Side Live. We banter a lot. It's really fun. We've got a great rapport. He's a very good friend of mine for years and years and years, and that comes across. I learned so much from him. I don't know if he learns from me, but you know, I talk a lot, so let's hope.
Don't worry.
And also, I have my show, Dispatches with Rania Khalek. We've got the Socialist Program hosted by Brian Becker. We've got the China Report, which is a super interesting show based on all things China. And, you know, on and on and on. Go check it out. And if you like it, support us. We are doing really important work. I'm so, so proud and privileged to be a part of this institution where I get to work with my friends, my comrades, and most importantly, hopefully inform people about the horrible world that we live in and how we can make it better.
Thank you.
Same question.
Yeah, want to wrap up?
You know, well said. Ditto. I'm with all of that. Yeah, I mean, you know, the thing is we sometimes say, we used to say all the time that we consider ourselves the media arm of the movement. Like, we don't view ourselves as separate from movements for justice and liberation, but a part of it. And you can't suppress something that lives in people's hearts. Like, that's just the reality. And as I've already explicated here, there's so many different everything good. You know, their information streams, people tried to suppress them. But well, I don't know. You now said the thing, so I don't want to give another historical story, but I guess I will. You know, Marcus Garvey, when he had his movement around the world, they had a newspaper called the Negro World. It was huge. It was like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people reading it every week all around the world. And they would ban it to come into the British colonies. They would go out of their way to ban it because they were afraid that people in Africa and these British colonies, and the French ones too, by the way, would read it and they would rise up. But all of the seamen, the sailors, the black sailors would find a way to smuggle it into the ports in these places. And Jomo Kenyatta, who later became the founding father of Kenya, has a great story about how he would hear about what was happening in the Negro world, because the sailors would smuggle it in, they would give it to longshoremen, who would then take it to meetings in Mombasa, that's the big port in Kenya. They would read it out to people who were the porters, who were coming from the interior, bringing all the tea and stuff that the British were robbing Kenya of. They would read it to them because a lot of them couldn't read. They would run it down, and then the porters would go back to their village, and they would then have a meeting that night of people and say, this is what was in the Negro world this week. And then each village would send a runner to the next village over and say, this is what was in the Negro world this week.
So in other words, we don't have to worry about social media censorship.
You're just going to run from village to village and tell the story. But the point being is because it wasn't just a newspaper. To them, this was the knowledge they needed to free their mind, to free themselves from British colonialism. So it didn't matter how hard they tried to suppress it. They would do whatever it took to get it into the smallest corner in just 3 days of, and this is Kenya in like 1922, like to get into the smallest corner of the thing because it lived in their hearts. So we can defeat all of this, but we have to not be separate. We have to not be individuals. We have to be institutions that are part of movements that live in our hearts, so that whatever obstacles they are, the ones we can't even dream of yet that they're going to put in front of us, we will find a way to overcome together and collectively, because it's not on the internet, it's in our minds, it's in our hearts, it's in real life, it's in our collectivity.
So thank you again to our panelists. Thank you to ArabCon. ADC, we know, is one of those institutions that's just prevailed
45
year
years.
after year, 45 years.
Big applause for ADC.
And can I just say, ADC, we saw some of what we were talking about last night at the gala, the signs, Arab Americans against apartheid. ADC has always been at the forefront of bringing a strong front between the African American community, the Arab American community in this country, to stand up for civil rights, to stand up for civil liberties. We have to continue that in the 21st century because they're targeting both of us as one and the same, and we can continue to push back. So I just wanted to say that as well. Thank you to ADC.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And thanks to our moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you.